back for another Music Theory Bite. This video is the first in a series about improvisation. It's going to cover techniques for melodically improvising within a single harmony. If that sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, then this is the video for you. Improvisation is the process of spontaneously creating music without having a specific musical notation as a guide. It's a very useful skill for musicians as, when you really think about it, all music started out at one point or another as an improvisation. Improvisation also shows whether a musician not only has a comprehensive knowledge of the musical language, but also if he or she knows how to apply it. There are several different types of improvisation. In this series, we're going to focus on just two of them. Harmonic improvisation, where you're going to learn how to put together harmonic progressions that adhere to the norms of common practice tonal harmony, and melodic improvisation, where you're going to learn how to melodically express a harmonic progression through improvisation. And that's what this video is about. Specifically, we're going to focus on how to express a single harmony over a set length of time, or as we music theorists like to call it, how to prolong a harmony through melody. So let's get started. When improvising, it's essential that you be aware of three things: time, meter, and scale degrees. Time refers to how much time you have to fill, either before finishing your improvisation or moving on to the next chord. This is really important because if you finish too soon, you look a little foolish sitting up on stage not making any sound. If you go too long, the people with whom you're playing likely have to scramble to figure out where you are, and getting the ensemble back together can be very tricky. Meter refers to the meter that you happen to be in. Good improvisations maintain a sense of clarity about the underlying meter. Or if they don't, they intentionally and creatively depart from the underlying meter before returning to it. But the key word there is intentionally. And finally, we have scale degrees. Melodic improvisation is a way of expressing a particular harmonic progression without using simultaneously sounding notes. It's important because, first, melody is a fundamental characteristic of music. Second, many musicians, like me, play instruments that can only sound one note at a time, so we have to be able to express chords through that one note at a time. And third, even if you play an instrument that can play all the notes in a chord at a time, you have to go beyond being able to just play blocked chords to make the music sound more interesting. So what we're after today is learning some basic techniques for the prolongation of a harmony, of playing out a harmony over a given length of time. We'll cover techniques for changing from one harmony to another in a later video. So what do you need to know about scale degrees in order to do this? Well, improvisation relies on an understanding of the chord which is sounding underneath the music that you create. This understanding has two components: harmonic function and scale degree content. There are three harmonic functions: tonic function, predominant function, and dominant function. Each has a role to play in music in creating a harmonic progression. So you might want to check out my video on harmonic progression before you go on with the rest of this video. Scale degree content refers to knowing which scale degrees will work and which won't over the implied or stated harmonic function. The most basic way to think of it is this: scale degrees that are explicitly in the chord should always work. If you see a tonic function chord, such as a tonic chord, Roman numeral 1, scale degrees 1, 3, and 5 should always be good. Now for each harmonic function, there are other scale degrees which oftentimes will sound quite acceptable, and in some cases will be an interesting addition to the harmonic function expressed in the chord. So for example, in tonic function, scale degrees 6 and 7 may also be used, though less frequently and usually to make the more interesting tonal color. Predominant function harmonies will use primarily scale degrees 2, 4, 6, and 1. Dominant function harmonies will use primarily scale degrees 5, 7, 2, and 4. And scale degree 6 may also be used, but tends to be a little bit less frequently. Now, you'll remember that in the minor mode, scale degree 6 and 7 have 2 positions, and this is where harmonic function helps you figure out which of those positions you should use. Scale degree 6 and 7 maintain their lowered position when you're dealing with tonic or predominant harmony. When you're dealing with dominant harmonic function, scale degree 6 and 7 typically go into their raised position. Scale degree 7 almost every time. And scale degree 6 will typically be raised when it's used as a passing tone between scale degree 5 and scale degree 7, regardless of the direction that the melody happens to be going. In most typical situations, improvisation calls for reading a lead sheet, which gives you chords instead of scale degrees. You'll need to translate the pitches indicated by the chord symbol into scale degrees to know which pitches are usable within each harmony. And I cover that in my video on reading lead sheets. So again, you'll want to check that one out as you start to learn how to improvise. You won't need it specifically for this video, as we're going to take a little bit out of context of reading. We're just going to work on techniques. So now that we know what scale degrees should work over each harmonic function, it's time to go over the actual techniques. When improvising, we're going to use 4 techniques. Each of these is going to help you express the correct harmony. Technique number 1 is repetition. To use this, simply select one chord tone and repeat it, keeping track of your meter and time. So for example, I'm going to stay in the key of C today. 1, 3, 5. There's my C major triad. Now I always need to keep track of time, so I'm going to go 4 measures of improvisation, and I'm going to keep track of meter by, an easy way to do it is simply repeat the same metric figure, the same rhythmic figure for each measure. And I'm going to demonstrate technique number 1, repetition, by selecting one of the scale degrees from that tonic triad. So here's my tempo. I'm going to be in 4/4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. 4 measures in 4/4 time, using only one pitch, and using the same rhythm for the first 3 measures before bringing it to sort of a metric resolution in measure 4. Now you'll notice that this technique is not terribly interesting, but it's safe. It will get you through any situation where you happen to get lost in the music and you need to just find your way back. So technique 1, repetition, isn't terribly interesting, but it's useful because it's safe. Technique number 2 is arpeggiation. We're going to add a little bit of interest to our improvisation by arpeggiating, or moving around between chord tones within the chord. So for example, I'm still in the key of C, but this time I'm going to improvise predominant harmony, which means that scale degrees 2, 4, 6, and 1 are my safest scale degrees. And what I'm going to do is I'm still going to use one rhythmic figure to help me keep track of my meter, and I'm still going to improvise just 4 bars. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 6, 4, 4, 4, 6, 4, 6, 4, 2. Our third technique builds on technique number 2, which was arpeggiation. I'm going to call this connected arpeggiation. So I'm still looking at moving back and forth between the chord tones in the chord or in the harmonic function, but instead of leaping between them, what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to connect them more smoothly by using what we call passing tones or neighboring tones, tones that aren't part of the chord, but we can use to build a scale between 2 of the tones that are in the chord. So I'm going to stay in the key of C major. I'm still going to improvise 4 bars. I'm going to stay in 4/4 time, but I'm going to free myself up rhythmically. I'm not going to simply repeat a rhythmic figure for 3 bars and then move on to something else. I'm going to try to make it a little bit more interesting. And I'm going to improvise dominant harmony this time, which means I'm going to be focusing on scale degrees 5, 7, 2, and 4. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 7, 1, 2. Practice and get comfortable with these 3 techniques before moving on to technique number 4. The 4th technique is what I call free improvisation, but it's not as free as you might think. What I do when I'm using technique number 4 is I combine techniques 1, 2, and 3, and I throw in a few more embellishing tones along the way. So for example, I might do a measure of repetition, a measure of arpeggiation, a measure of connected arpeggiation, and I might throw in some non-chord tones that I leap to and then immediately get back to a chord tone somewhere else after I sing the non-chord tone. So for example, I'm going to stay in C major. I'm going to go back to tonic harmony. I'm still going to maintain freedom of my rhythmic figures, but I'm going to do 4 measures of tonic harmony. So I'm back to scale degrees 1, 3, 5, and since I'm getting a little bit more creative with this, I might throw in 1 or 2 other scale degrees before returning to one of those scale degrees. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 5, 6, 5, 5, 7, 6, 5, 3, 5, 4, 3, 3, 2, 1. So those are our 4 techniques. Start working them into your practice routine and be very intentional about how you do it. Maybe on Monday, practice only technique number 1 and see how you can make it interesting. On Tuesday, work on technique number 2. On Wednesday, work on technique number 3, and on Thursday and Friday, work on technique number 4. Improvisation is a learned skill. Nobody starts out sounding like Charlie Parker. It takes practice, both on your instrument and without an instrument, by simply singing in order to get good at it. Work some improvisation into your daily practice routine. Specifically, work on doing things correctly by the book, and then push yourself to try some more experimental ideas. Let yourself make mistakes. If something doesn't sound good to your ear, then see what you need to do to get it back to something that does sound good. Don't just simply stop. Actors who do a lot of improv are trained to never treat anything as a mistake. They have to accept whatever comes to them and then make it a part of their dramatic narrative. This is also excellent advice for musicians. Work on the sounds that are there instead of the sounds that you wish were there. All of this amounts to learning how to prolong a harmony through melodic creativity, which is important for all musicians to understand, not just jazz musicians. Even if you're not a jazz musician, knowledge of the basics of improvisation is useful because all music started out as improvisation. And once you understand the basic techniques, you can see them in just about any piece of tonal music that you come across. Say you're doing a particularly troublesome analysis project, if you apply your knowledge of the techniques of improvisation, you can oftentimes reverse engineer the music backwards so that you can see what the composer was thinking as he or she created a particular passage. So let's summarize. Improvisation is the creation of musical material without specific musical notation that tells you what to create. We're focused in this series on harmonic improvisation, creating chord progressions, which we'll cover in later videos, and melodic improvisation. How do you express those harmonies through melody? In this particular video, we focused on how to express a harmony that doesn't change. It requires knowledge of harmonic function, of which we have 3 of those: tonic, predominant, and dominant, and the scale degrees that work well in each. In tonic harmony, we're generally sticking with scale degrees 1, 3, and 5, although 6 and 7 can be made to work also. In predominant harmony, we're generally working with scale degrees 2, 4, 6, and 1. And in dominant harmony, we're typically working with scale degrees 5, 7, 2, and 4. Sometimes scale degree 6 will sneak in there. And remember that in the minor mode, it's the raised scale degree 7, which is the hallmark of dominant harmony. We have 4 techniques for expressing a harmony through improvisation. Those are repetition, arpeggiation, connected arpeggiation, and free improv. Finally, practice this every day on your instrument and without an instrument. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Treat those mistakes as opportunities to find your way back onto something that works. Well, that does it for this video. If you found it helpful, please like. Feel free to leave constructive comments below. And as always, to stay on top of this and other music theory bites as they become available, please subscribe to my channel. Until next time.